So FiiO launched a headphone, the FiiO FT3, which is coming in with a splash in the open back headphone market. Let's take a look at this thing. I want to thank FiiO for sending this out. Like always, no one is asking me to say anything good or bad. All thoughts and opinions are my own. The first thing I want to commend them on is their build. I am not sure if the entire thing is metal, but it certainly feels like high quality, well-made materials. The looks themselves are going to be either a love it or hate it design. This cup design here, it really looks like a Hot Wheels wheel to me. I don't know why. I can't get over it, but I can't deny that it's very, very well made. And because the general design actually is very comfortable as well. It's kind of a little bit big on the headband, but it should offer a lot of room for larger size heads. Like I can get it all the way down here. It has swiveling cups, 3.5 millimeters in the bottom, interchangeable pads with a clip-on system that is reminiscent of focals. And overall, this is a pretty safe design. I think that they pretty much nailed a first iteration right off the get-go. So good job, FiiO. Given the fact that this is launching at a $300 price tag, one of the more impressive things about this is the accessories package that this comes with. It is very impressive. Okay, so the first thing you get is this kind of hard but lightweight carry case. Pretty nice. It also comes with this soft bag that you can kind of place everything in. It comes with 2 sets of pads, which I'll talk about in a second. A interchangeable cable system. Now this is a copper cable with an interchangeable tip design where you can actually unscrew the tip and insert one of these other options. So it has a 4.4 millimeter that you can screw in. It just has, of course, your 1/4 inch adapter if you want to. And then if you want to use the XLR that this does come with, you got to plug in the 4.4 millimeter first and then adapt the XLR to the 4.4 millimeter. This system works really well. I like this system a lot. I don't think I've seen it on a full-size headphone that I can think of. I've only seen this sort of system on IEMS. So it seems like FiiO is learning from their own IEM department. So these pads are overall pretty good. The choice of materials here are suede for one set and perforated pleather for the other set. Sound signature wise, I prefer, and I'm going to be primarily reviewing with the suede pads. I think they're a little bit better sounding. One thing I will say though, is that the opening on the inside is going to be a little bit small for some ears. So this might actually go from an over-ear headphone to a slightly on-ear headphone for certain individuals. And I think the suede is going to be a softer, kind of more enjoyable wear for a lot of people who have larger ears. Now inside of this headphone, this has a massive 60 millimeter driver, and you can actually see the size of that thing. For reference point, the HD 800, which is known for having a big driver, is a 56 millimeter driver. So this is 4 millimeters bigger than that. Now the impedance for this driver is 350 ohms. So tube amplifiers like that really perform really well with this. And I think a lot of audiophiles are going to prefer the higher impedance rating of this, and I don't blame them. Sound pressure level though is coming in, I think, at 105 dB per milliwatt. So pretty decent there. Okay, between the 2 pad sets, you have a choice between 2 different tonal balances and 2 different kind of styles of sound. One of them is going to be a slightly warm neutral sound signature with the suede pads. It's going to lean a little bit heavier in the bass department than the pleather pads. It's also going to lean a little bit less in the treble department than the pleather pads and be a little bit warmer throughout the vocal range, though it's not a super vocal focused headphone. We'll talk about that later. So between the 2 pad types, you have a slightly colder version and a slightly warmer version. Pretty predictable. Now I will say overall tuning here is definitely following the Harman target. This is either going to be a good thing or a bad thing. And if you're familiar with the Harman sound, this should sound very familiar. So for treble response, the detail and resolution here is actually fairly on point with this price tag, though I don't really consider it to be a top performer. I think that something like a Sundara is going to have a little bit more detail and resolution capability from its driver. It also has a little bit more treble forward frequency response. That's partially what's causing that, but I think just raw driver speed is also another thing that the Sundara has over this. But I think that tuning wise, a lot of people, again, if you like that kind of Harman style of treble tuning, they're going to prefer this over the Sundara. If you're looking for frequency forwardness for enjoyability, then I think this will win for people who like Harman. If you're looking for detail, capability, and just raw information, I think the Sundara wins for treble response. Now with the suede pads, you're not going to be getting a whole lot of air or upper end frequencies, but you will get a little bit more on the pleather pads, but you're going to have costs in other areas with the pleather pads. And I think I personally prefer the suede ones. Now, I know a lot of people really love Harman, but in terms of the general sound signature of Harman, it leaves a lot to be desired for me for mid-range. And this headphone is no different. It's not that the mid-range sounds hollow, but it certainly doesn't sound super rich and fulfilled and weighty like a headphone like an HC600 can, or like an HC650. Those headphones have a serious weight to the vocalist where they feel intense, they feel full-bodied, and headphones like this slightly feel a little bit shallow in that department comparatively. And the vocals seem like part of the music, but not quite the full focused vocalist that I personally prefer them to be. Though, again, if you like this style of sound signature where it's a little bit more focused in the upper frequencies than it is in the lower mid-range, you are going to prefer this style of tuning, which isn't a bad thing, and a lot of people like this style. It's just not for me personally, even though it's technically very proficient. And I think the pleather might be a little bit more technical here, but I think most people will prefer the tonal shifts and the timbre shifts of the suede pads being a little bit more naturalistic sounding compared to the more sterile sounding pleather pads. Now, bass on suede is a lot of fun. It's very active. It feels like a very strong part of the music. There is a level to this that I really enjoy where it's kind of got this seismic bass response where you can actually feel it go lower than your hearing range can go. So like below 20 hertz, you can feel the driver moving. And I think that's a cool experience, even if you can't audibly hear it. So if you're listening to really, really low down music, this is a good headphone for that. And I think a big reason for this is the sheer size of that 60mm driver. I think that's a big reason why this kind of hits the way it does. Again, sorry to sound like a repeating record, but it does kind of follow the Harman Target quite well in terms of bass response. So it's got a slightly elevated bass response compared to some of the mid-range. And you definitely feel like that with this headphone. The bass is not as clean as the Sundara, and it's a hair on the bloaty side. I think it's enough to be enjoyable, but not necessarily enough to be distracting or detrimental to most people's experience. But seasoned audiophiles who are really used to incredibly clear planar bass might listen to this and find it to be a little bit sloppy, but not too bad. So sound staging is way better on the pleather pads, but you lose a little bit of the other enjoyability factors like the slightly more mid-range and the better bass response of the suede. So I don't know if the sound staging benefits are enough for me to personally want to switch to the pleather full time, but it is better for sound staging. With the suede sound staging, you get kind of that typical 3 blob sound. So it's like 1 blob in the middle for your vocalist and 2 blobs on the side for your side instruments. This carries the same kind of general direction, but it just kind of does things a little bit wider than the suede does. And I think if you're a sound staging freak, you'll prefer the pleather, though I don't know if this is going to be the best headphone for people who are seeking exclusively soundstage. Okay, so versus the Sundara, to wrap this up, considering they're competing in the same price category, and in my opinion, the Sundara is the headphone to beat here. The Sundara has more detail and better sound staging capability flat out. It's not going to sound as tonally rich as this headphone is, though. This headphone will perform better in the bass response, I think. Overall, it's a little bit stronger, and I think that most people prefer the strength over the clarity of the Sundara's bass response, though users' preferences will vary. I think that overall both are wonderful competitors, but made for 2 different types of people. And some people, like myself, would prefer the Sundara, and some other people will prefer the FT3. Luckily, you get to choose. The accessories package, though, is definitely better on the FT3. So my conclusion, if you like Harman, this is a great headphone for you. I don't personally love the Harman Target all the time. It really depends on the implementation of it. I personally look for things that advance the Harman Target or change the Harman Target a little bit to be just a little bit different than its general tuning. And I think that this fits pretty tightly within Harman's general tuning. And I think some people are absolutely going to love that. And that's perfectly fine. In general, I think this thing is a great competitor, and I'm glad to see another option that hits a little bit differently than some of the other options in this price category. And I think for certain people, this is going to be an extremely appealing proposition. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for watching. You can find links to this product down in the description below. See you guys next time. Bye.